Douluo Zhi Ning Rongrong Introduction. www.zhaozhuiyuan.com. Sun Feng went on a date with a girl for the first time. Excited, he fell asleep and woke up to find that he had become Ning Rongrong. The system was self-defense, but he let himself play and run away. What will be the story behind? Stay tuned. https://www.zhaozhuiyuan.com. Chapter 1. Regenerates Ning Rongrong. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, where is this? Why is it all water? Sun Feng's consciousness gradually awakened, surrounded by a moist touch, as if surrounded by water, and an inexplicable fear couldn't help but arise in his heart. He looked down and found that his hands were unusually small. He was shocked and said, "Why are my hands so small? I have become a fetus. What is going on here? Is it true that I have been reborn?" Just then, a gentle female voice sounded in her ear. "Ji Gu, she's kicking me." Sun Feng's heart moved and he quickly perked up his ears, wanting to know who he had reincarnated and whether he would become the powerful young master and live a carefree life from then on. "Really? Loner, it seems like a mischievous kid," a gentle and jade-like male voice responded. "That's not necessarily true, maybe it's a mischievous little girl," Lon Air retorted playfully. Yes, the little girl is even better, as beautiful as you." The man laughed heartily, his voice filled with joy. At this moment, another cold voice sounded. "Fengji, Xiaolan, congratulations. Our Seven Treasures Glass sect is about to have someone to follow." "Thank you very much, Uncle Sword." Sun Feng was puzzled for a moment and said, "I have been reborn into the Seven Treasures Glass sect. Wait, I don't remember Ning Rongrong having a brother." He unconsciously reached down with his little hand, trying to confirm his gender, but suddenly froze and said, "Why not?" He felt a bolt from the blue in his heart, and Jian Ji couldn't accept this fact. "I actually regenerated Ning Rongrong." Sun Feng felt despair in his heart. He was originally a great young man of the 21st century, but before he could find a girlfriend, he fell asleep because he was too excited about going out with a girl for the first time. Unexpectedly, he regenerated a woman. Ding dong, the host has been detected to be disheartened, and the system automatically generates it. Sun Feng was stunned for a moment, and a glimmer of hope surged in his heart. With divine tools to assist. Great, what's wrong with women? They can also dominate the Douluo continent and become a generation of empresses. However, he quickly fell into despair again because he found himself unable to laugh at all. System, quickly bring me a few divine-level martial souls. Sun Feng prayed in his heart and began to fantasize about becoming the protagonist and stepping on others. The system binding was successful, and the owner's request was detected. "You have a gift package, please check it. For beginners in the martial arts world or for players in the martial arts world, please choose." The cold system voice rang again. Without hesitation, Sun Feng chose the Zhongheng Jianhu gift pack and continued to fantasize about the future glory in his heart. Congratulations to the owner for obtaining the Sunflower Encyclopedia, as the gift package of Zhongheng Jianhu is being opened. The system voice rang out again, but it stunned Sun Feng. The divine horse situation. Is this causing me to go to the palace? Sun Feng was shocked for a moment, but then thought of another possibility. No, I'm a woman now and can practice. This is the top-level martial arts technique in Jin Yong's martial arts, including internal skills, sword techniques, needle techniques, and body techniques. It's much stronger than Tang San. Thinking of this, Sun Feng couldn't help but feel happy. It seems that with this invincible system, I can definitely dominate the Douluo continent. Tang San, Bibi Dong, and Qian Renxue are all scumbags in front of me. Sun Feng was full of confidence in his heart. However, At this moment, the system voice rang out again. The method of making Qi Mo sword, Do armor, and the cultivation method of cyclone. Sun Feng was ecstatic and felt like he was about to burst into laughter. How invincible, how invincible. Sun Feng sang a song in his heart, but suddenly heard the cold sound of the system. The gift package has been distributed, and the system is unbinding. Sun Feng was taken aback for a moment, and suddenly felt a bad premonition in his heart. Wait, system, what does that mean? Due to the owner's choice of the ultimate gift package, the system has distributed it all at once. Go to Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com to unbind and countdown for 60 seconds, starting with 60, 59, 58. The system's voice was cold and heartless. Then I'll choose the gift package for entering the martial arts world for the first time. Don't leave me in the great god system. Sun Feng quickly begged, but the system mercilessly continued the countdown. Sorry, the rewards have been distributed and cannot be changed. Countdown 3, 2, 1, goodbye, my 250th master. The last voice came from the pitch-black space, making Sun Feng feel that the cold voice seemed to have a hint of mockery. Sun Feng felt a wave of despair in his heart, and it took him some time to regain his ability to think. He grabbed his small chest tightly and felt a sharp pain in his heart. I feel so heartbroken. I really want to scream and vent my frustration. However, at this moment, several ancient books emitting golden light suddenly appeared in his mind. Fortunately, with these ultimate gift package rewards, my weak heart didn't stop at once. Sun Feng comforted himself a bit and decided to learn internal skills first to win at the starting line. He opened the first page with a sudden thought, and a diagram of human acupoints and meridians appeared before his eyes. However, when he saw the text clearly on it, he couldn't help but curse profusely. What chow? Is it still in traditional Chinese? Alright, I'll endure it. Fortunately, it's not in Oracle Bone script. Sun Feng began to read carefully, but soon encountered difficulties. I didn't travel through the world of martial arts, how could I know about the 8 meridians and the flow of true qi? In my era of martial arts cessation, I couldn't learn this. What's this called? When others travel through time, the system distributes martial arts techniques and the protagonist knows how to do it. It's good that the system throws down a few books and runs away. Who am I going to argue against? Sun Feng became increasingly angry as he thought about it, and then looked at several other peerless auxiliary techniques, feeling a wave of depression in his heart. He grabbed his small chest hard, but couldn't withstand the huge blow and fell asleep. Chapter 2. Encountering Attacks. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, the night is as deep as ink, enveloping the entire world. The originally peaceful night was suddenly torn apart by a scream of terror. Brother Zhi, be careful. Sun Feng's consciousness was blurred, only feeling his body light, as if being gently lifted by an invisible force, and his whole body rose up like a dream. An inexplicable fear surged in his heart, and the darkness around him seemed to devour her. Suddenly, a mournful roar pierced through the night sky, like torn cloth, heartbreaking. No, Lawner. It was Ning Feng's desperate cry, filled with endless pain and struggle, as if to tear apart the darkness. At this moment, a roar exploded like thunder, shaking the air as if it were trembling. The figure of Sword Douluo appeared faintly in the darkness, and his long sword had turned into a sharp cold light, slashing towards the man in black. With a loud bang, the sword energy surged and shook the surrounding leaves, as if a green rain had fallen. Uncle Jian, Lana is injured. Please help her quickly. Ning Fengji's voice choked up, tears swirling in her eyes, and her face was filled with helplessness and despair. Sun Feng felt his breathing becoming increasingly difficult, as if he was bound by an invisible heavy pressure, and his fear surged like a tide in his heart. At this moment, a faint moan came into Lan Er's ear. Lawn Air slowly opened her eyes. Her face was pale as paper, but there was a determined expression in her eyes. Uncle Jian, Brother Ji, save my child. Although her voice was weak, it was full of the power of maternal love. Don't speak, Uncle Jian will definitely cure you. Ning Fengji endured her grief and muttered, the 7 treasures and glass are 3 souls. Her voice was filled with determination and belief, as if she wanted to dispel the darkness. Sun Feng felt a warm current pouring into his body, and his breathing instantly became smoother. The invisible force slowly lifted her up, and then the surrounding space seemed to become unusually tight, squeezing her almost unconscious. At this moment, there was a sharp pain in her buttocks, accompanied by a crisp slap. Wow! She cried out in pain, her voice almost shattering her eardrums. Then, she was tightly embraced by a warm embrace. Ji Gu, just call her Rongrong. In the future, you should take good care of her and yourself. Lawn Air's voice became increasingly weak, eventually turning into silence. Her life flashed across the night sky like a shooting star, brief and brilliant. Sun Feng, no, she should be called Ning Rongrong now. She tried hard to open her eyes, and what caught her eye was her pale and beautiful face. Her mother. An indescribable sadness surged in her heart, as if the whole world had lost its color. She couldn't help but burst into tears, the cries echoing in the night sky as if to tear apart the darkness. Crying and crying, she fell into a deep sleep in her mother's embrace. In her dream, she seemed to see her mother's smile, so gentle and so kind. She knew that her mother would surely guard her in heaven and accompany her growth. In a daze, she heard Ning Fengji's angry roar. Check. Find out who did it. My 7 treasures glass sect is at odds with him. The voice was full of anger and determination, as if to completely destroy the evil in the darkness. Every time he wakes up, Ning Rongrong's mood is unusually heavy. The blood-connected family ties made her unable to let go of her mother's passing, and every time she thought of that pale face, her tears couldn't stop falling. This made Ning Fengji feel heartbroken, but as he watched his daughter cry, he could only temporarily suppress his grief and wholeheartedly take care of her. Gradually, Zhongli regained his former vitality. But Ning Fengji held a wave of anger in his heart. As long as he found out who the culprit was, he vowed to make the other party pay a painful price. His eyes sparkled with determination, as if he wanted to eradicate all the sins in the darkness one by one. During this period, 2 big shots often teased Ning Rongrong. The renowned Gu Douluo and Jian Douluo. A person with a straightforward and eloquent personality can always make Ning Rongrong laugh heartily when looking for a book garden at www.zhaoshuyuan.com. The other is cold and silent, but his eyes reveal a deep love for Ning Rongrong. No matter how different their personalities are, they all have a strong affection for Ning Rongrong, as if they regard her as a treasure. Time flies, and 2 years have passed in the blink of an eye. One day, Ning Rongrong squatted under a blooming peach tree, with pink petals falling in the wind on her immature face. She frowned and stared at an ancient book in her hand, muttering to herself, I can't understand it. It's really heartbreaking. How could I lose a good system? The peerless martial arts in front of me can't be practiced. She clenched her hands and pounded the grass hard, as if to vent her frustration. Not far away, 2 elderly people are leisurely chatting. Suddenly, Gu Douluo raised his eyebrows and looked in the direction of Ning Rongrong, saying, Old Chen, what's wrong with Rongrong? Why is Rongrong pounding the ground every now and then? She has a grudge against the ground. It's not like you took her flying, your head was blown out, right? His tone was somewhat teasing and teasing. Sword Douluo laughed heartily at the words and said, Get out, old bone, you're itching, right? Before he could finish speaking, Ning Rongrong looked up at this side with a black line on his face. She pointed angrily at Gu Douluo and said, Grandpa sword, Grandpa dog is bad, fight. Fight. Her little hand swayed in the air, but she couldn't speak clearly. The two old men were stunned for a while, but suddenly Douluo burst out laughing and said, "Old dog, look at the sword." Then he swung his sword towards Douluo. Douluo also understood, his face instantly turned black, and he gritted his teeth and started fighting with Douluo. Ning Rongrong watched with relish from the side, occasionally waving her little hands to cheer for her two grandfathers. "Come on, come on." Her face was filled with an innocent smile, as if all the troubles in this world had nothing to do with her. Chapter 3. Martial Soul Awakening. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, spring has passed and autumn has arrived. In the blink of an eye, Ning Rongrong has already welcomed her sixth spring and autumn in her life. In these 6 years, Ning Rongrong has been busy and fulfilling. Since learning to walk, her life has been like a clock that has been wound tightly, never having a moment to spare. In the morning, she pestered Jian Qinshin to learn swordsmanship. In the afternoon, she followed Gu Rong to practice the 7 treasures glass fist. In the evening, her father Ning Fengji would accompany her in reading and learning. However, despite her efforts to learn, the 3 elders loved her dearly and spent most of their time playing and frolicking with her. She has learned a lot, but it seems like she hasn't learned anything, and she can't help feeling a little regretful in her heart. Rongrong, will the martial soul awaken tomorrow? Are you excited? Douluo's voice shattered her contemplation, with a hint of indulgence in her playful tone. Ning Rongrong obediently replied, "Grandpa Bone, I'm so excited, really excited." Her eyes flickered with anticipation, as if she had already seen the brilliant future after awakening her martial soul. "Grandpa Bone, what kind of martial soul do you think I will awaken? Will I become a dragon like you? Or will I hold Grandpa's sword with my father's tower on my head?" She blinked her starry eyes and looked innocent. Right. Douluo chuckled contemptuously. Ning Fengji shook his head helplessly on the side and said, "Rongrong, go to sleep. There's everything in your dream." Although his tone was a bit teasing, his eyes were filled with tenderness and anticipation. Upon hearing these words, Ning Rongrong couldn't help feeling a bit discouraged. She knew her father was comforting her, but she couldn't help but think, if there were really these 3 martial souls, that would be great. She felt embarrassed as she crawled into her father's arms and rubbed her head, causing the 3 of them to burst into laughter. Amidst laughter, Ning Rongrong turned around and got into Douluo's arms again. "Grandpa Jian, can you help me awaken?" Her voice carried a hint of coquettishness and anticipation. Douluo doted and caressed her head, saying, "Okay, I'll awaken you tomorrow." His tone was firm and gentle, as if he had already seen Ning Rongrong's glorious future after awakening his martial soul. However, Ning Rongrong begged impatiently, "No, wake up now, okay? Otherwise, I won't be able to sleep at night." Her eyes flickered with desire and excitement. Douluo hesitated for a moment, but when he saw Ning Rongrong's expectant gaze, he finally nodded and said, "Okay, I'll awaken you now." As he spoke, he began preparing the awakening stone. Upon seeing this, Ning Fengji couldn't help but retort, "Uncle Jian, you will spoil her like this. Besides, it's not in line with the rules." Although his tone was serious, his eyes were filled with indulgence and helplessness towards his daughter. Douluo said unquestionably, "Who dares to say our precious princess? Who dares to speak too much?" His voice was firm and powerful, as if declaring his protection of Ning Rongrong to the world. Ning Fengji helplessly supported his forehead, while Ning Rongrong stuck out his tongue and playfully smiled at him. Douluo began to awaken his martial soul for Ning Rongrong. He said seriously, "Come on, stand inside." Ning Rongrong walked in with a nervous and excited heart. 3 lives and 4 lives divine martial souls, I'm here. She roared, as if to release all the expectations and excitement in her heart. Jianqin's heart was momentarily stunned, and his soul power was cut off, followed closely by the delivery of soul power. Ning Fengji's face was covered in black lines, while Gu Douluo was happily on the side, unable to close his mouth. "Calm down and feel the martial soul," Jian Qinshin said sternly. Ning Rongrong took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and began to feel the changes inside his body. She felt as if she was in a wonderful world, surrounded by a mysterious and powerful aura. Her heart was beating faster, as if she was about to jump out of her chest. Suddenly, she felt a warmth in her left hand, and a small emerald green tower appeared in her palm. Okay, good, then it's her right hand. Looking for Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com, Ning Rongrong was filled with anticipation as she stared closely at her right hand, waiting for the appearance of another martial soul. However, after a while, her right hand still had no response. She couldn't help but start feeling anxious and disappointed. What's going on? It's been so long, and my right hand still hasn't felt anything. Is it a body martial soul? My heart beats so fast. Yes, it must be the heart of the body martial soul. But it seems like I haven't heard of such a martial soul before. At this moment, an excited voice sounded. Okay, 7 Treasure Glass Pagoda, I have a successor to the 7 Treasure Glass sect. Ning Rongrong opened his eyes and saw that the awakening stones around him were gone, while the 3 elders were excitedly looking at her. She blinked her eyes in confusion and then looked down at her palm. I saw a small emerald green tower lying quietly there, emitting a faint light. She was momentarily stunned and said, "Is it just a 7 Treasure Glass Pagoda? It's not 9 treasures yet. What's the situation? This is over. What's my future? In the future, I'll have to shout, 'Come on, from the cat behind. How can I dominate Douluo?'" Her heart was filled with disappointment and confusion. "Rongrong, come and test your soul power," Ning Fengji's voice interrupted her thoughts. She regained her senses and saw her father looking at her eagerly. She casually said, "Level 9, no need to take the test." Upon hearing this, Ning Fengji's face turned pale as he said, "Nonsense. Rongrong, come and test it." Although his tone was harsh, his eyes were full of concern and expectation for his daughter. Ning Rongrong dared not be petty anymore and obediently placed his hand on the glass ball used to test his soul power. I saw a bright light on the glass ball, and then displayed a number. Level 9. The 3 elders looked at her strangely, as if they were witnessing an incredible miracle. "Hee, I guessed," Ning Rongrong awkwardly explained. Chapter 4. Apprenticeship Sword Dust Heart. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, Ning Rongrong returned to his room, feeling restless for a long time. She opened the dusty sunflower encyclopedia, feeling both anticipation and unease in her heart. In recent years, she has been exploring in the library of the 7 Treasures Glass sect, searching for ways to cultivate, but always feels out of place with the knowledge of this time and space. The 8 Meridians chart became her only reliance, allowing her to find a glimmer of hope in confusion. Tonight, she tried to cultivate again and unexpectedly succeeded. The feeling of internal energy flowing through her body made her feel like she was in another world. She covered her underdeveloped chest, and an indescribable excitement surged in her heart. I'm here in Douluo continent, all the men are down, all the women. Cough cough cough, I'm now a woman, I can't think that way, otherwise I'll really be neither male nor female. Ning Rongrong covered his underdeveloped small chest with his small hand, feeling like he was jumping very hard. I don't have congenital heart disease, do I? Ning Rongrong muttered to himself, his heart full of doubts. But on second thought, I realized it was impossible, so I quickly shook my head. Ning Rongrong, don't think recklessly. Hurry up and practice. Think about Tang San, who has been practicing Xiantian Gong since he was young and has even developed a full soul power after birth. He is covered in hidden weapons and his body methods are wandering around. Do you still have time to think recklessly here? Ning Rongrong quickly self-destructed and began to focus on cultivating internal strength. After a night of cultivation, not only did I not feel any fatigue, but I was also full of energy. In the morning, Ning Rongrong walked into the yard, took a deep breath of fresh air, and began her cultivation. She held a small wooden sword tightly in her hand, which was of great significance to her. She remembers that it was made by Jian Qinshin herself when she was 4 years old. Although she hasn't really learned any swordsmanship in these years, her love for swordsmanship has never diminished in her heart. Have I really not learned anything in these 6 years? Ning Rongrong asked himself and then laughed at himself. Anyway, it's all because I'm too lazy myself. Now that I've cultivated sunflower internal power, I need to double my efforts and not let myself down anymore. She clumsily swung her wooden sword, although her movements were not smooth enough, each sword was full of determination and perseverance. The tip of the sword curved gracefully in the air, as if cheering for her determination. Not far away, 3 old men quietly watched her practice. Their eyes were filled with surprise and shock. Old Chen, when will you teach Rongrong swordsmanship? Gu Douluo asked in shock. Yes, Uncle Chen, your swordsmanship is so exquisite. I have never seen such advanced swordsmanship before. Ning Fengji couldn't help but admire it. Sword Douluo awkwardly smiled, but the waves surged in his heart. He carefully observed Ning Rongrong's sword moves and was shocked in his heart. He had never seen such a bizarre swordsmanship before, and every move and technique was full of changes and mysteries. As Ning Rongrong's swordsmanship becomes more proficient, the speed of his sword moves also becomes faster. Gu Douluo couldn't help but feel a chill as he watched this scene. He thought that if he fought with Jian Douluo in the future, he might be unable to resist the rainstorm-like sword moves. Excited, I stepped on a nearby branch. Sword Douluo glared at him, gesturing that he should not disturb Ning Rongrong's cultivation. But at such a close distance, Ning Rongrong has cultivated his inner power again, how could he not hear it? Turning his head, he happened to see Ning Fengji, Jian Qinshin, and Gu Rong. At this moment, the 3 of them were squatting behind a stone, looking embarrassed. Grandpa Jian, Grandpa Bone, Dad, why are you squatting behind a stone? Is there a mouse there? Ning Rongrong asked curiously. The 3 blushed, turned red and smiled awkwardly. Isn't this supervising your morning exercise? Ning Fengji said seriously. Jian Douluo looked at Ning Rongrong and felt an impulse to recruit his disciples. He said seriously, Rongrong, you have practiced swordsmanship well. Would you like to learn from me? Ning Rongrong was taken aback and then knelt down in surprise, respectfully bowing to his master. Sword Douluo laughed heartily and helped Ning Rongrong up. Okay, get up quickly, Rongrong. You don't have to kneel to become a disciple. Ning Rongrong was taken aback for a moment, then realized that in this era, it was not necessary to kneel before becoming a teacher. Thinking about what Tang San had said at the time, he wondered how Tang Hao would feel upon hearing this. Ning Fengji looked at this scene and felt a bit worried when searching for the Shuyuan website www.zhaoshuyuan.com. He was worried about whether it was appropriate for Ning Rongrong to learn swordsmanship. After all, it seemed a bit inappropriate for girls to learn swordsmanship. But seeing the determined gaze of Sword Douluo, he could only bury his worries in his heart. Upon seeing this scene, Gu Douluo glared fiercely at Jian Douluo. He was dissatisfied in his heart, feeling that Sword Douluo had taken his limelight. He couldn't help but say, I also want to take her as my disciple. This sentence instantly pulled Ning Fengji back from his contemplation to reality. Uncle Gu, don't make any more trouble, Ning Fengji said helplessly. Gu Douluo glared at him and said discontentedly, what are you talking about? Ning Rongrong quickly ran to Gu Douluo's arms and coquettishly said, call Grandpa so close, right, Gu Douluo. Upon hearing this, Gu Douluo burst into laughter, and his dissatisfaction dissipated. Sword Douluo sighed helplessly as he watched this scene. He knew the character of Gu Douluo, so he had to drive them away under the pretext of imparting swordsmanship. He looked at Ning Rongrong seriously and said, "Learning swordsmanship requires great perseverance and cannot be abandoned halfway. Rongrong, do you still need to learn?" Ning Rongrong said decisively, I want to learn. Not learning is not enough. In the future, I won't be left behind by others. Upon hearing her words, Sword Douluo was moved in his heart. He knew that Ning Rongrong was a determined girl who could definitely become an outstanding swordsman. He hesitated and said, "Well, let me play the sword move you just practiced again." After that, Blush blushed, knowing that he was attracted by the sword move. Ning Rongrong chuckled and didn't say anything, but started practicing seriously. As the swordsmanship became more proficient, Ning Rongrong's movements became more and more fluent. When she finished playing the final version, a majestic sword intent surged into the sky. Following closely, two figures followed closely, and it was Ning Fengji and Gu Douluo who were attracted by the sword intent. Chapter 5. Broken Mirror. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, Dad, Grandpa Bone, Master. What's going on? Ning Rongrong's voice was filled with an indescribable doubt and deep concern. Her gaze was fixed on the figure, who stood tall and towering, emitting an awe-inspiring aura. Her heart was filled with concern and anticipation, as if at this moment, all her thoughts had converged onto that focal point. Gu Douluo looked at the figure, with a glint of envy in his eyes. He sighed lightly and said, "It seems that he is about to break through." His voice revealed an indescribable emotion, both a desire for strength and a helplessness towards the passage of time. He knew that such opportunities were extremely rare for every cultivator, and Sword Douluo had to put in great effort and cost to reach this point. After reaching level 95, every level is as difficult as climbing to the sky, Gu Douluo continued. In addition to reaching the peak of soul power and spiritual power, it also requires emotional perception to touch that invisible barrier. Both Lao Jian and I have been trapped at level 95 for nearly 10 years, unable to progress. His words revealed a deep sense of helplessness and regret, as if telling the story of their generation's hardships and struggles. Ning Rongrong was mesmerized by the sound, and her gaze sparkled with admiration. She is well aware of the hardships experienced by her master and Gu Douluo, as well as the efforts and costs they have put in for cultivation. She was even more determined in her heart to cultivate well, hoping that one day she could be as strong as them. At this moment, a loud noise suddenly came from the sky, as if thunder had suddenly appeared, causing everyone's eardrums to buzz. Immediately after, a huge sword shadow rose up into the sky, piercing into the clouds like a silver dragon soaring between heaven and earth. The sword shadow emitted a brilliant light, as if to illuminate the entire sky. Subsequently, a figure appeared on the sky like a deity descending to earth. He wielded a long sword and unleashed an incredibly terrifying and graceful sword technique. Wherever the sword light reaches, the space seems to be shaken by it, as if it is about to be torn apart by the sharp sword intent. Every time that figure swung his sword, it seemed to carry the power of destroying heaven and earth, making people tremble with fear. Ning Rongrong was stunned, feeling a strong sense of familiarity in her heart, but at the same time, she was convinced that she had never seen this swordsmanship before. She couldn't help but exclaim in surprise, "What kind of swordsmanship is this?" Her voice was filled with surprise and curiosity, as if she wanted to explore the secret behind this swordsmanship. The 9 divine and demon moves, the first move. Slash the sky. The majestic and cold voice of Sword Douluo came from the sky, as if a thunderbolt was exploding in everyone's ears. With his command, a brilliant sword light suddenly cut out, like a shooting star crossing the sky, carrying the momentum of destroying everything. In that moment, the distant sky was cut into pitch black, as if torn apart, revealing a deep and mysterious void. "Old Bone, come, let's have a fight." Sword Douluo's voice was filled with a sense of courage and war, as if he wanted to incorporate the entire world into his sword intent. With a flash of his figure, he rushed towards Douluo and pointed his long sword directly at the opponent's vital point. Upon seeing this, Douluo looked at the terrifying sword light with a tingling scalp. He knew that Douluo's current strength was already unfathomable, and with this sword strike, he might not even have any residue left. However, he refused to show weakness on his lips and greeted him with a loud shout. His figure transformed into a lingering shadow in the air, intertwined with the sword light of Sword Douluo, unleashing astonishing energy fluctuations. The two of them clashed at an extremely fast speed, which was impossible for Ning Rongrong's naked eye to see clearly. She could only see spatial fluctuations resembling gas explosions exploding around the two, each of which made her heart skip a beat. She tightly gripped her father's sleeve, as if wanting some comfort and strength from him. Zhan Tian. Looking for Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com, suddenly, there was a loud shout in the air. The brilliant sword from before appeared again and slashed towards the Bone Douluo in the air. This time, the sword light is even more dazzling than before, as if it is about to split the entire world apart. Douluo was greatly shocked in his heart and quickly unleashed his strongest strike. Bone Divine Dragon. I saw him transform into a huge bone dragon centered around himself, with countless bone spurs rising from the ground, forming a barrier to protect himself. However, facing the terrifying sword of Sword Douluo, the barrier transformed by Bone Dragon was as fragile as paper paste. The next moment, the huge white Bone Dragon was submerged by a sword shadow. Immediately after, a black shadow fell from the sky and hit the ground fiercely. After the smoke and dust cleared, a disheveled figure crawled out of the huge pit, and it was Douluo. He roared angrily, "Old swordsman, we agreed not to use that move." His voice was filled with anger and unwillingness, as if he couldn't accept being defeated by Sword Douluo. Douluo burst out laughing and said, "Humph, I finally got one step ahead of you. I have to beat you once anyway. Don't worry, I only used 20% of my soul power." His voice exuded a sense of pride and provocation, as if demonstrating his strength and superiority to Douluo. Ning Fengji quickly stepped forward to relieve the situation and said, "Uncle Jian and Uncle Bone, stop making trouble. Uncle Bone, go change your clothes quickly." After congratulating Sword Douluo, he turned around and left. He knew that although these two elders liked to play tricks on each other, their relationship was incredibly deep. This breakthrough of Sword Douluo is also a great joy for the entire sect. Ning Rongrong watched this scene and felt a strong sense of excitement in his heart. She became even more determined to cultivate well, hoping that one day she could be as strong as her master and two grandfathers. Chapter 6. Practicing sword is a hard work. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. As Ning Fengji and Douluo left, Douluo's gaze fell on Ning Rongrong. A hint of doubt flashed in his eyes. "Rongrong, where did your swordsmanship come from?" Ning Rongrong was slightly taken aback, her face a bit pale. She hesitated for a moment before whispering, I dreamt of it." Her voice trembled slightly, as if she didn't quite believe she would say such a reason. Sword Douluo furrowed his brows, obviously dissatisfied with the answer. He said in a deep voice, "Speak up well." His tone had a hint of sternness, making Ning Rongrong dare not conceal anything further. Ning Rongrong took a deep breath, with a hint of determination in her eyes. She said seriously, "Master, I didn't lie to you." Douluo looked at her and sighed deeply. A hint of complex emotion flashed in his eyes. "You. Starting today, you are not allowed to practice this swordsmanship again. When will I let you practice? You can practice again." His tone was harsh, but his eyes showed concern for Ning Rongrong. Ning Rongrong was stunned and asked in confusion, why can't we practice? Duoluo looked at her with a hint of pain in his eyes. He said in a deep voice, there's no reason why. It's not suitable to practice now. You need to lay a solid foundation before practicing, otherwise it's like playing a monkey, the more you practice, the more blind you become. Although Ning Rongrong was a bit disappointed, she obediently nodded and said, okay, master, you have your word. What do I learn? Ning Rongrong asked. Duoluo didn't speak, but with a casual move, a branch floated into his hand. With a gentle wave, the branch pierced out like a sharp sword and then chopped down. Every movement appears so smooth and powerful, as if it is an artistic expression. Learn this, Duoluo said, handing the branch to Ning Rongrong. Ning Rongrong took the branch and began to imitate the movements of Sword Douluo, wielding his sword. However, her movements appeared stiff and clumsy, and every time she swung her sword, it seemed like she was struggling. Duoluo looked at her with a hint of dissatisfaction in his eyes. He said in a deep voice, perform each action 1,000 times, use all your strength, and focus your mind. Ning Rongrong nodded and began to swing his sword seriously. However, every swing of the sword made her feel an unbearable pain in her arms, as if she was about to break them off. But she gritted her teeth and persisted, waving the branches time and time again. After an unknown amount of time, Ning Rongrong finally couldn't hold on and fell over. Her face was pale, and sweat soaked through her collar, making her feel as if she had collapsed. Sword Douluo watched her fall to the ground, with a glimmer of satisfaction in his eyes. He knew that only with such strict training could Ning Rongrong truly become an outstanding swordsman. Since then, practicing swordsmanship has become Ning Rongrong's daily routine. Before dawn, she began to wield her sword, after fainting, wake up in the medicine tank and then swing your sword. So repeatedly, it wasn't until a year later that she could complete 2,000 swords without fainting. Soaking in the medicine jar, Ning Rongrong couldn't help but laugh at herself and say, my body is too poor. Isn't it that it takes a few days for a peerless genius to complete it? She touched her chest and smiled helplessly, oh, the only downside is that there hasn't been much change in this chest flesh. Is it innate? I remember my mom is also very big, is it practicing swordsmanship? I don't think so, it's still developing. She began to focus on cultivating her internal power, and every time she swung her sword, she would practice her internal power much faster. During this year, although I was a bit tired, the speed of cultivation was exceptionally fast. The Sunflower Classic has reached the second level of cultivation and successfully added a second soul ring called Second Speed. However, this soul ring did not bring her much surprise, it was still an 800-year-old yellow soul ring with no outstanding features. Ning Fengji couldn't help but feel a surge of heartache as she watched her daughter train so hard. But he knew that this was the path his daughter had chosen, and he could only silently support her. However, Douluo couldn't bear it anymore. He had tried to persuade Douluo several times, but each time it ended in failure. Master, how long should I practice? Ning Rongrong's sword-swinging movements became more and more proficient, but his body's fatigue also became stronger. She felt like every time she swung a sword, her body was hollowed out. Duoluo looked at her with a deep light in his eyes. When you can swing 2,000 swords in the morning, he said. Ning Rongrong sighed helplessly and continued to wave his small wooden sword in his hand. Zhaozuiyuan.com This sword is no longer a small toy from the beginning. Since half a year ago, Duoluo has replaced it with a new weapon made of iron and wood. This sword is much heavier than ordinary black iron, making her feel exceptionally difficult every time she swings it. However, it was this feeling of difficulty that kept her pushing her limits. Spring has passed and autumn has arrived, and in the blink of an eye, it has been 2 more years. That day, Ning Rongrong finally swung 2,000 swords all morning. She ran excitedly to Duoluo and shook his arm, saying, Master, I did it. Duoluo opened his eyes and looked at her smile, nodding slightly. That's good. Can I practice your peerless sword moves now? Ning Rongrong asked eagerly. However, Duoluo said calmly, let's swing the sword 10,000 times a day starting from today. Ning Rongrong was stunned, his hands frozen in mid-air. She suspected that she had misheard. Master, are you joking? No, go practice. Sword Douluo's tone remained cold and stern. Ning Rongrong's face turned black in an instant, and he cursed inwardly. Helplessly, he picked up the wooden sword inserted beside him and walked to the tree to continue wielding it. On the side, the figure of Gu Douluo quietly appeared. He looked at the figure of Ning Rongrong wielding his sword and couldn't help but sigh. Old Chen, is this too harsh? Duoluo remained silent for a moment before slowly saying, practicing swords is just like that. Rongrong has great talent and perseverance, but unfortunately. His voice carried a hint of sigh, as if there was something unspoken. Gu Douluo didn't continue, and both of them fell into silence. But Ning Rongrong continued to wield his wooden sword, sweat sliding down her forehead and wetting her collar. She knew that only by practicing continuously in this way could she become stronger. Chapter 7. Methods of Separation and Control. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, time flies like a white horse, and the little girl who used to wield a sword has now transformed into a graceful young girl. Those once clear and innocent eyes have now added a touch of coldness and depth. After 3 years of hard work, Ning Rongrong finally fulfilled his requirements under the strict guidance of Duoluo. I thought Sword Douluo would teach her some exquisite and unparalleled sword moves, but to my surprise, Sword Douluo only asked her to repeatedly practice the sword moves she had dreamed of. Although Ning Rongrong felt somewhat dissatisfied and felt that his master seemed to be playing tricks, he had no way to refute it. The sword moves in the Sunflower Encyclopedia may seem ordinary, but they are almost the foundation of the foundation. There are not many fancy moves, but they emphasize speed, accuracy, and strange and unpredictable changes. Ning Rongrong practiced over and over again, and finally grasped the essence of it through repeated sword swings. She withdrew her sword from its sheath and looked at the wooden sword that had been with her for many years. Finally, she understood in her heart the master's intention for her to swing the sword with all her might over the years. It has been 6 years since I first learned swordsmanship. Except for the internal skills section, she has already cultivated the rest of the Sunflower Manual to a great extent. However, the cultivation of internal skills has reached a critical bottleneck. The 7th layer needs to bridge the human body's heaven and earth rainbow bridge, which is a huge obstacle. If it fails, it may face the risk of reincarnation and rebirth. Although she had a smooth journey, she felt unprecedented pressure at this moment. Fortunately, her soul power has also reached level 69, which has made the 3 elders in the family happy. After all, a 12-year-old soul emperor has a strong talent that is comparable to Qian Renxue. And the reason why Qian Renxue has such talent is also because of her innate level 20 soul power, which has saved her many detours on the path of cultivation. As for Tang San, although he is the protagonist, his talent is mediocre. When he awakened, although he also had level 10 soul power, it was because he had practiced for many years in advance. If it weren't for the protagonist's aura endowing him with various adventures, I'm afraid any genius would be able to crush him. However, Ning Rongrong had his own plans in mind. She knows that although she has outstanding talent, her practical experience is seriously lacking. In recent years, she has been practicing in seclusion and has never had the opportunity to engage in physical activity with others. She has not even participated in family competitions. Therefore, she decided to improve her practical skills. At the same time, she also needs to cultivate Do Armor and Cyclone, but these require the support and assistance of her family. So, Ning Rongrong walked briskly to the front hall and happened to see Ning Fengji and the 3 of them present. She called out sweetly, Dad, Master, Grandpa Bone, you all are here. Gu Douluo joked, oh, isn't this our little treasure? Ning Rongrong stuck out his tongue at him and ran into Ning Fengji's arms. Ning Feng doted and hugged Ning Rongrong, saying, I heard from your master that you have made some progress in your swordsmanship. I plan to teach you the unique secret of our 7 treasures glass sect. The 7 treasures separation control method. Upon hearing this, Ning Rongrong was pleasantly surprised and said, really? This is a good thing. She knew that the 7 treasures sub-control could be versatile and assist multiple people, playing a great role in battles. The momentum of Sword Douluo changed, and a sharp wave dispersed, forming a sword domain that isolated them from the outside world. Then, Ning Fengji took out an old ancient book and handed it to Ning Rongrong. 7 Treasures of Control. Ning Rongrong eagerly opened the pages of the book and read it carefully. She found that the 7 treasures control is indeed extensive and profound, mainly a method of cultivating spiritual and mental power. The combination of the two can enable people to multitask and assist multiple people in saving soul power. The cultivation method may seem simple, but in reality, it is incredibly profound. When she saw the 8th and 9th controls behind the 7th one, she couldn't help but look up at Ning Fengji with confusion. Ning Fengji understood her confusion and explained, you don't need to look at the 8th and 9th in the back. Our ancestor's martial soul was the 9 treasures glass pagoda, which is why he created this 9 treasures separation control method. Unfortunately, the later generation's martial soul mutated into the 7 treasures glass pagoda. Not only did their soul power break through less than level 80, but even the 8th control of this separation control method cannot be practiced. It was originally thought to be a soul power limitation, but later the sect's title Douluo was ordered by your grandfather to prohibit future generations from practicing the 8 treasures separation control method due to heavy casualties during the practice. The 9 treasures separation control was changed to 7 treasures separation control. After listening to Ning Fengji's explanation, Ning Rongrong couldn't help but twitch his tongue. After memorizing the 7 controls, she curiously looked at the 8th control and instantly widened her eyes. How can this 8th control be so similar to the method of cultivating the first cyclone? Surprisingly, it can only be cultivated based on the cultivation of the first cyclone, mind spin. It's just that the method of practicing cyclones has not been perfected, it's too general, and it's not as detailed as the method I got. The 9 control method is based on the second cyclone, heart spin, and is still more general. After reading it, Ning Rongrong was shocked and said, I'll go. This ancestor cow, at least it's also extreme Douluo. Otherwise, it could be a demigod. She finally understood why the 7 treasures glass sect could become the upper 3 sect. When reading novels in my past life, I used to think that the 7 treasures and glass sect became the top 3 sects because of their strong auxiliary abilities. I always felt that this reason was very far-fetched. It turns out that the root is here. She looked up at Ning Fengji and others, took a deep breath, and said, Dad, Master, Grandpa Bone, I'm not pretending anymore. I'll show my hand. Actually, I'm a twin martial soul. Chapter 8. The Law of Cyclones. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. In the hall, Ning Fengji and the 3 of them were all stunned when they heard Ning Rongrong's words, as if they had heard something incredible. They looked at each other with a hint of doubt and disbelief in their eyes. Ning Fengji furrowed his brows and chuckled lightly, Rongrong, don't make such a joke. This is not for fun. However, Ning Rongrong did not flinch. She bit her lip and retorted, I'm not joking, what I said is true. After that, she turned around and walked to the table, starting to study ink and take a pen, preparing to silently write down the method of practicing the cyclone. The 3 of them saw the situation, although they still had doubts in their hearts, they curiously walked behind Ning Rongrong, wanting to explore the truth. I saw Ning Rongrong writing stroke by stroke, although the handwriting was unique, it revealed a kind of resilience and determination. The little slutty-mouthed Douluo couldn't help but tease and say, "Oh, the word Rongrong has been so unique for 10 years. As soon as he said this, the two elderly people next to him couldn't help but laugh. Ning Rongrong's pen paused, and a blush appeared on her face. She muttered to herself, "I didn't hear you. I must practice calligraphy diligently in the future and not be laughed at like this again." She calmed down and continued to write silently. "This is the 8 control method." "Rongrong, what are you doing with this?" Ning Feng asked in confusion. "It's just showing off my memory. I've memorized the results for 2 hours, Gu Douluo joked again. Ning Rongrong secretly muttered to herself, if you don't listen, you'll just have a poor memory." She remained calm and continued to write silently. With the passage of time, Ning Rongrong finally silently wrote down the method of cyclone cultivation. She put down her brush, stretched lazily, and then turned to look at the 3 of them. I saw their 6 eyes staring wide, as if they had seen something incredible. "Rongrong, how could you write about the 8 control and 9 control methods? They are so detailed. And is this the 10 control method behind them?" Ning Fengji asked urgently. Sword Douluo and Bone Douluo also agreed, "Yes, Rongrong, what's going on here?" Upon seeing this, Ning Rongrong couldn't help feeling a bit proud. She cleared her throat and began to explain, "The name of this cultivation method is cyclone, which should be derived from the 8 control and 9 control methods of our 7 treasure glass sect. Cultivating the first cyclone can help people achieve the title Douluo smoothly, without any bottleneck before level 94, cultivating the second cyclone can make people cultivate to level 99 or even a semi-divine state without pressure. However, cultivating the third cyclone is extremely difficult." As Ning Rongrong spoke, the 3 of them became more and more surprised as they listened. They never imagined that such a cultivation method existed. Especially Ning Fengji, he was so excited that he could hardly control himself. He urgently asked, "So, is it possible for me to break through the bottleneck when practicing the first cyclone?" Ning Rongrong couldn't help but hesitate as he looked at Ning Fengji's hopeful gaze. She knew that although practicing the first cyclone had the potential to break through the bottleneck, the risk was equally enormous. She took a deep breath and slowly said, "Dad, the risk of your current cultivation is extremely high, and the success rate is very low. Although the requirements for cultivating the first cyclone are very low, as far as I know, none of the cultivators below level 85 have succeeded, and the most are those at level 89. However, the success rate is still only half. Therefore, I do not recommend you to take the risk and try it." Upon hearing these words, Ning Fengji's gaze suddenly dimmed. He nodded silently to show understanding. However, at this moment, Ning Rongrong suddenly changed his tone and said, "However, Dad, I may know where the things that can evolve your martial soul are." When this statement was made, all 3 of them were taken aback. They looked at Ning Rongrong incredulously, as if seeing a glimmer of hope. Ning Fengji asked excitedly, "What? How do you know? Where is it? What exactly is that?" Ning Rongrong took a deep breath and slowly said, "Did you forget? As I mentioned earlier, I have a second martial soul." As soon as she finished speaking, the 3 of them were in an uproar. They obviously don't believe it, because they were all present when they woke up, and if there were a second martial soul, they would have discovered it long ago. However, what Ning Rongrong said now made them hesitate a bit. Gu Douluo asked humbly, "Do you really have a second martial soul? What kind of martial soul is that? Is it related to what you're saying?" Ning Rongrong's heart tightened, knowing that this lie must be kept true. So she took a deep breath and said, "Of course it's true. My second martial soul is called Anticipation, and every 10 levels, I can passively predict something in the future. If it weren't for that, how would I know the method of cyclone cultivation?" Upon hearing this, the 3 of them still had doubts in their hearts, but looking at Ning Rongrong's serious expression, they couldn't help but start to believe a bit. After all, Ning Rongrong has always been a clever and witty child, and her words are not impossible. However, they were unaware of the anxiety and unease in Ning Rongrong's heart. She knew that although the lie she made up could temporarily deceive them, it would eventually be exposed. Moreover, she doesn't know how her future will develop. She only knows that she must work hard to cultivate and become stronger in order to protect herself and her family. Chapter 9. Qiluo Tulip. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. In the hall of the Seven Treasures glass sect, the atmosphere was like frozen frost, oppressive and suffocating. Ning Fengji sat upright on the main seat, with an imperceptible tension between his eyebrows. He just heard his daughter Ning Rongrong mention the method of the evolution of the Seven Treasure Glass Pagoda's martial soul, and his heart was like a tumultuous river and sea. His voice at this moment was trembling with a hint of imperceptibility. Rongrong, do you really know the method of the evolution of the Seven Treasures Glass Pagoda's martial soul? Although Ning Fengji's voice tried to maintain calmness, the urgency and expectation in it burned like a raging fire, difficult to conceal. Ning Rongrong nodded with a firm gaze like a rock and said, "Yes, Dad. At the moment when my soul power reached level 60, my predictive ability told me that there is a fairy grass called Qiluo Tulip. As long as it reaches the age of 10,000 years, it can awaken the sleeping power of the Seven Treasures Glass Pagoda and let it evolve." As soon as these words were spoken, everyone's faces in the hall changed, as if being blown by a cold wind, and the solemn atmosphere became even heavier. Ning Rongrong didn't stop because of this. She took a deep breath and continued, "However, although I know where the Qiluo Tulip is growing now, I don't know exactly what it looks like. But I know that there are 3 people who should know what this fairy grass looks like." Ning Fengji urgently asked, "Who?" His voice was filled with anticipation, as if he had grabbed the last straw to save his life. Ning Rongrong closed her eyes slightly, as if recalling something. After a moment, she slowly opened her eyes and said, "As far as I know, Douluo should know the appearance of this immortal grass. He has a flower and grass catalogue, which should have detailed records. In addition, Yang Wudi, the leader of the Posey tribe, may also know. As for the third person..." She paused for a moment, shook her head, "I can't say, he's not good for us. Tang San cannot move for the time being. He has too much luck, and Ning Rongrong suspects that the Shura god has already listed him as a candidate. If he guesses correctly, he will end up playing. It's better to give it a try, just to take this opportunity to test it out." Upon hearing this, Ning Fengji furrowed his brows and said in confusion, "It's reasonable for Douluo to like flowers and plants. But Yang Wudi, isn't he the head of a single attribute for sect-breaking clan? How could he know what this immortal grass looks like?" Ning Rongrong explained, "Not bad, it's him. Although this person is famous for his soul-breaking spear, he actually has a lot of research on the art of refining medicine and should be familiar with various flowers and plants." Ning Fengji nodded and pondered, "I see, then we can start from Yang Wudi." However, Ning Rongrong shook his head and said firmly, "No, Dad, I suggest we make a deal with the Martial Soul Hall to exchange for the map in the hands of Douluo. Even if the cost is high, it's worth it. In addition, we should also include Yang Wudi. Dad can personally recruit him." Upon hearing this, Ning Fengji frowned slightly and hesitated, saying, "Our relationship with the Martial Soul Hall is tense. Since Yang Wudi may know, why do we have to pay such a high price to exchange for the map?" Ning Rongrong sighed helplessly and said, "I'm not sure Yang Wudi definitely knows, but Douluo definitely knows. So, let's be prepared for both." After a moment of silence, Ning Fengji asked again, "Also, it may not be easy to handle your mention of the clan that was included in the compilation. They were once affiliated with the Haotian sect, and our 3 previous sects were united, so it's not easy to explain." Ning Rongrong said firmly, "No, we must win over this defeated clan. I don't care about the other 3 attribute sects, but Yang Wudi must find a way to win them over. The old man looked at her with a puzzled expression on his face, and Ning Rongrong explained, my cultivation requires a special pill to assist, and only Yang Wudi can refine this pill. Upon hearing this, the 3 old men were all shocked, looking at each other with a solemn expression in their eyes. Ning Rongrong continued, I remember when the Martial Soul Hall fought against the Haotian sect at the book garden www.zhaozhuiyuan.com, the Haotian sect abandoned the single attribute for sects after retreating from the mountain gate, causing a large number of casualties and almost annihilating the sect. Now they should have a deep resentment towards the Haotian sect. It shouldn't be too difficult to recruit and destroy one of the clans. As long as my father is sincere, there should be no problem. After all, our 7 treasure glass sect never does anything to abandon our comrades. Moreover, Yang Wudi's combat power is not bad, and he should also be a soul Douluo with the ability to fight against the title Douluo. If my father really can't persuade him, let him know. We have a way for him to break through the ban on Douluo. Upon hearing these words, the 3 old men were all startled in their hearts, looking at each other with a look of uncertainty in their eyes. After a moment, Gu Douluo tentatively asked, are you planning to teach him the cyclone technique? Ning Rongrong shook his head and smiled mysteriously, that method is too dangerous for him, and it may not necessarily be useful. Ning Feng was puzzled and said, the soul-breaking spear martial soul is very special. It is naturally equipped with a soul ring, and its strength is higher than that of its peers. However, it also makes it impossible for them to break through the title Douluo. Ning Rongrong smiled slightly, with a hint of cunning in his eyes. Dad, have you forgotten the secret of the evolution of the 7 treasures glass pagoda's martial soul that I mentioned? Ning Feng was taken aback for a moment, then suddenly realized, with a hint of surprise in his eyes. Qiluo Tulip. Ning Rongrong shook his head and whispered, no, it's another kind of fairy grass. There's only one Qiluo Tulip, and it can't be given to anyone else. Ning Fengji was lost in thought. After a moment, he lifted his head and a hint of determination flashed in his eyes. Okay, Dad will take care of this matter. It's nothing else, just because Rongrong needs it for your cultivation, Dad will do it without hesitation, even if it's against Haotian sect. Although his voice was calm, his determination was as firm as a rock, which cannot be ignored. Chapter 10. Dugu Bo. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, Ning Rongrong fell into contemplation, and according to Time's speculation, in another 2 years, Tang San would step into the eyes of ice and fire. She must act quickly and take control of everything in her own hands, otherwise, by then, perhaps everything will have nothing to do with her. Whenever he thought of Dugu Bo, Ning Rongrong couldn't help but laugh. Tang San obtained numerous immortal herbs from him, not only winning the favor of the 7 monsters for himself, but also earning a lot of money. However, Dugu Bo failed to obtain any immortal grass and instead continued to serve Tang San. What's even more ridiculous is that Tang San has been deceiving Dugu Bo. Although soul bones can serve as highly toxic containers, once they exceed their capacity, it will be an irreparable act of suicide. Rongrong, what's wrong with you? Why are you laughing so happily? Ning Fengji asked curiously. Ning Rongrong regained his senses and shook his head gently, saying, it's nothing, just thinking that those precious immortal herbs are actually in the hands of poison Douluo, but he knows nothing. It's really a bit funny. What? Are you saying that the Qiluo Tulip is in Dugu Bo's hands? The 3 of them were all surprised when they heard this. Yes, Master, Grandpa Bone is indeed in his hands. We need your 2 help on this trip, Ning Rongrong said seriously. Upon hearing this, Gu Douluo sneered and said, Xiao Rongrong, you also look up to him too much. A last-ranked Douluo with low combat power, I can defeat him with just one hand. Grandpa Gu, although Dugu Bo's combat power is not strong, his use of poison techniques is not enough to prevent him. For safety reasons, you should take action together with your master and make a quick decision. Ning Rongrong reminded. Ning Fengji nodded and agreed, yes, Uncle Gu, don't be careless. I will immediately send someone to search for his whereabouts. No need, I know where he is. He should be practicing in the Sunset Forest, surrounded by a poisonous mist that is easy to identify, said Ning Rongrong. Okay, let's set off immediately, said Sword Douluo coldly. Before departure, Ning Rongrong added, by the way, Master, Grandpa Bone, Dugu Bo has a head soul bone that he obtained from hunting the Medusa Snake Emperor for 50,000 years. That soul bone has an extremely powerful soul skill. Medusa's gaze, which can petrify everything, including the title Douluo. As for how long it can petrify, I am not sure. Upon hearing this, Gu Douluo's face showed surprise and he said, what? Does that old poison have such a precious head soul bone? Is it produced by a soul beast that has been around for 50,000 years? Is this skill so abnormal? This old boy's luck is probably too good. No wonder he has been able to survive after years of enmity with the martial soul hull. It seems that this time we really need Lao Chen to take action together, otherwise we might have let him run away. After speaking, a black door of space suddenly appeared, and Jian Douluo and Gu Douluo walked in and disappeared. Ning Rongrong looked at the disappearing door of the space and couldn't help but sigh inwardly, Grandpa Bone's skill is really convenient. After the two of them left, Ning Fengji turned to Ning Rongrong and said seriously, Rongrong, don't talk to anyone about your second martial soul in the future. We won't ask you the reason. For the three of us, we'll just assume you know. Ning Rongrong nodded obediently, but inwardly said, it's really too naive. The old foxes are not easy to deceive. Alright, since you don't expose me, I'll keep pretending. At this moment, in the Sunset Forest, a pitch-black door of space slowly opened, and the figures of Sword Douluo and Bone Douluo walked out of it. Gu Douluo looked at the environment in front of him and said, Old Chen, I will block the space later, and you can directly strike and kill. Okay, you need to be careful not to get close. Although ordinary poison is ineffective against the title Douluo, there is no guarantee that he will have any means to suppress the bottom of the box that can threaten you, Jian Douluo reminded. Gu Douluo nodded and began to search for Dugu Bo's whereabouts. Soon, he discovered the cave surrounded by poisonous mist, which was the place where Dugu Bo practiced. Gu Douluo released his own pressure, causing Dugu Bo, who was currently practicing, to be startled and fly out of the cave to investigate. When he saw Gu Douluo standing in the air, he was about to ask who he was, but Gu Douluo had already launched a big move. Space Gate, Bone Dragon, imprisoning the surrounding space. Dugu Bo felt the confinement of the surrounding space and felt a panic in his heart. He thought to himself, no, it's the confinement of the bone capacity space. It seems like I didn't offend him, did I? However, just as his mind was spinning, a huge sword light fell from the sky and directly penetrated his body. Dugu Bo's eyes were wide open, as if he was saying, I didn't offend you too, did I? His body slowly fell down, and a soul bone with a faint glow lit up in his head. Upon seeing this, Gu Douluo's eyes flashed with a hint of greed, and he reached out to grab the soul bone. However, at that moment, an emerald green snake suddenly shot out of Dugu Bo's sleeve and headed straight for Gu Douluo. Due to the close distance, Gu Douluo was unable to dodge and had to use his soul power to block with his hands. I didn't expect the little snake to bite his hand directly through his soul power. Following closely, a sword light slashed at the spot where Gu Douluo was bitten, cutting off a large amount of flesh and blood. Blood splattered out, and Gu Douluo grinned and widened his eyes. He watched as the flesh and blood that had been cut off turned black instantly, feeling extremely angry. He then launched a long-range attack on the little green snake and blasted it away. The little green snake rolled a few times in the air, then slipped and ran away. Gu Douluo looked at the bright red blood flowing in his palm and the soul bone emitting a faint light on the ground, feeling a wave of fear in his heart. Thank you, Lao Chen. If it weren't for you taking action in time, I might have had to arm myself today. Sword Douluo also walked over and looked at Dugu Bo and the soul bone on the ground, saying, Dugu Bo is really covered in poison. Even if you die, you can suffer a big loss. Let's quickly put away the soul bone and storage bag, and then set fire to him. After speaking, the two of them started to put away their soul bones and storage bags, and then burned Dugu Bo's body to ashes with a flame. Looking at the blazing flames, Gu Douluo said with lingering fear, Old bone, let's go. The poisonous mist surrounds here, and no one will come in for the time being. Let's go back and tell the sect leader to send someone to guard this place. Okay. Subsequently, with a casual move, Gu Douluo saw another door of space, and the two of them walked in. In the blink of an eye, they returned to the Hall of the Seven Treasures Glass Sect.